and welcome to the latest episode of Good Enough Chats. My name's Dan Bowsher, I'm the host and producer of the show. And before we jump into this particular conversation, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up about the kind of things we're going to be covering. So I'm joined by Mark Jennings for this Good Enough Chats, and we go right to the very beginning for him, the expectations that surrounded him when he was growing up as a kid, the impact that had on how he behaved as he was growing up and became an adult, the knock-on effect that all of those things had on eventually his own physical and mental health. So he talks about the roller coaster ride of starting and operating businesses that then went on to fail. He talks about the breakup of relationships that he's had, having been married a couple of times. He talks about the impact of physical illness on him. He had a really horrible bout of pneumonia, which he'll tell you about in much more detail. But ultimately, as with all of these conversations, Mark is here to tell the tale. And he has gone through some crushing lows along the way, yet he is here having learned invaluable lessons that he's really kindly shared in this episode for you. So I hope you find this useful. If you do, please put it in front of people that need to see it. Share it across your social channels, and help us to make sure that more of these episodes can get to the people that need to see them. Without further ado then, let's jump into it. Hi Mark, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Very well, thank you. I'm feeling reasonably rested after the weekend. For full disclosure, for the benefit of our audience, this is the day after the Lionesses retained the Euros title, and that was incredible. Watching that last night with my daughters and with my nephews as well, absolutely fantastic. And I feel like I'm still riding a bit of the crest of that particular wave at the moment. Long may it last.
Yeah, that's fair. As someone who's half English, half Irish, I tend to dip in and dip out. If England are getting successful, then I sort of forget the Irishness a little bit. So yeah, I was fully rooting for the Lionesses last night, and yeah, I mean, phoning in from Sweden, we have a big focus on women's football, so it's an extra good win. I think everyone wins when women's football is well played and more people see it, engage with it. So they're happy days.
Yeah, it was absolutely awesome. Mark, please, could you introduce yourself to our audience? Could you go with all the basics? So name, where you're from, where you're living. We'll double up on that one. What you do for a living, and the worst flavour of crisps you've ever had.
Okay, let's do it. So my name is Mark Jennings, originally from Aberdeen, although you wouldn't spot it from the accent. I lived and worked in London for a number of years, where we, of course, first met. And then I'm a proper sort of Brexit exile, now living in the sunniest part of Sweden, if you can imagine it, down in the beautiful city of Malmö, just across the bridge from Copenhagen. What do I do for a living? People ask me that a lot because, of course, as you move to a new city, your people were, you start to meet people and engage. You're making a whole new set of friends. You don't have your family nearby. And at first, I used to sort of dither around a little bit because I've done a bunch of different things, never being particularly happy in one thing. But I'm leaning more and more into saying I'm a writer because that's something I'm very passionate about. I spend a lot of my life writing, particularly about whiskey and spirits. We'll come on to that. If you drink enough, eventually you've got to be paid to do it. Otherwise, people ask questions. But of course, like all writing these days, even if you did it full time, that you're still only earning some crumbs, really. So especially at my level of writing. So of course, odd jobs on the side and anything else, sort of marketing communications related, I'll happily take money for. Awesome. Oh, and crisps wise,
worst crisps ever.
Well, worst case, it's funny because they've got, again, you move to a new country and you just assume all crisps are pretty much the same. Whereas not the case. They have a huge love of different flavors of herb crisps and things like this. So literally almost any of the Swedish crisps that everyone default believes that you must love and brings to your house, I absolutely hate. So Whenever anyone comes from the UK, I ask for a care package, give me some good old walkers, something like that. I don't want to be, as I said, I left for sort of Brexit reasons, but there are a couple of things that the Brits do better than anyone.
I think the Brits do crisps 100% better than anybody else in the world. I think one of the flavors that is a kind of, and I said this to a previous guest, one of the flavors that is great to start off with, but soon becomes a struggle is I think it's French peanut flavor crisps. They're like Wotsits, but they're peanut flavor. You can just imagine much of the moisture is absorbed from those.
No, no thanks. No thanks. I don't eat a lot of crisps, but I'm a bit of a sort of there's a nostalgic element that I need to go back to, So give me some cheese and onion, happy days.
Yes, yes. Good strong flavors. I love that.
That's right. That's right. No messing around.
Excellent stuff. So, Mark, let's jump straight into the first question, and that is, why are you here today sharing your lived experiences of mental health?
It's a great question. I was really delighted to be asked. And I guess the reason I was asked is because I have a almost compulsion to talk a lot about mental health, both my own mental health and just mental health in general. Not particularly out of any necessarily charitable reason, a very selfish reason, in that I found, having gone through huge struggles myself, that the more people I told about it, the stronger some of my friendships became, and almost deliberately weakened other, let's say, connections that I thought were friends or at work, who found, let's say, my state of being quite difficult to be around. So just being really honest about it has really, really helped me. And the more opportunity, I think, to be able to talk honestly about how you're feeling, and for like perfection not to be like the default standard, especially for men, but across the board, I think that's got to be helpful. And as we spoke about before, if one person listens to this and says, okay, that's interesting, there's a point there that I hadn't thought about, or it opens a door that they hadn't done, or God forbid, they're in a much worse place, a place I've certainly been to myself, and maybe you have, where you don't feel that any doors open, one step towards that light at the end of the tunnel, then wow, like what an opportunity. And I think the work that you're doing here, when you sort of add it together, if it's one person whose life is better at a time, in the way that I've certainly received that support, then great. So yeah, I guess a slightly altruistic reason at the end, but definitely selfish at the heart of it. It makes me feel better if we can talk about this subject.
But I think it's so important to get that out there, because a number of the guys who've been on the show before now have kind of expressed a bit of guilt about benefiting themselves from sharing their experience. I said, do not feel guilt about that. This is, I think, often a cathartic kind of conversation to have, right? Even for somebody who has talked about this stuff in the past, just being able to bring that up again, to talk through it again, it gives you, it kind of lessens the psychological weight on your shoulders, and it is going to help someone out. Oh, and I know that now. This is, we've done over 25 episodes of this, and the feedback has been very consistent at each and every episode, whether it's directly to me or through feedback that the guests have received themselves. It's reaching people and it's helping them. And as long as that's working and people are able to take positive steps to support themselves and help themselves in their own circumstances, it's 100% worth it. And if you benefit from it, all the better.
Right, exactly. And I think that exactly that thing, like if even just 1 second of the day when you're at your lowest, you can feel like you're not alone, even if it's just hearing someone whose story, either reflects yours or is the antithesis of yours, but you're like, okay, they've got through this and they're still alive.
Yes.
That's something to consider. That's like a little hook to kind of hold on to. And sometimes certainly for me, it was just that, like it looks so far away, the idea that I'd be sitting talking to you just now, that it was one or two little hooks all those years ago that allowed to get there. And if something like this does it, then super, lovely.
And I think the light at the end of the tunnel point that you just made, I've kind of found myself using this analogy over and over again now, but to go from a position where you don't know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel to believing that there is, even though the tunnel itself might be twisting and winding and you can't see it at the moment, that's a huge step forward. That's a level of progress that is, incredibly powerful for you as an individual to realize it's still there even if you can't see it.
And you only see it, it's like hill walking, you only see it in reverse. It's only, what is it, life is lived forward and understood backwards. You have to jump across that bridge to be able to look back. And what an incredibly difficult thing that is. Yeah. And always that silly sort of, it's a journey is one step in front of the other. These things ring true, as irritating as they are as a poster, because it is just that. It's often just kind of keep going. But again, we'll speak a bit about this. Sometimes you feel keeping going is the hardest possible thing to do.
Yeah. And I think we may have just birthed the hashtag more than a meme as well. So I'm really grateful for you answering the call, Mark, to come forward and have this conversation today. But before we jump into that, how has your mental health been over the last week? How are you doing?
It's a great question, a really great time. So Sweden has these 4 weeks of holiday that everyone takes pretty much at the same time, and I'm halfway through them. So on the good side, I can't remember what I do for a living, and nobody bothers you, and that's absolutely amazing. But the other side, it's been a very life-changing scenario for me, which we'll get into a little bit. But it's the first time I've had my daughter for 2 whole weeks just on my own. And also this inception point between 2 weeks where I won't see my daughter, who's the light of my life and a big reason that I'm still here. She's gone off to her mother, and I'm very happy. She's going to have an amazing time. So it's a really interesting one where I've been holding it together, kind of make the best experience for 2 weeks. She's hyperactive like me, so we've been, camping and climbing, and it's nonstop. Daddy, what are we doing? Oh, is it not as good as yesterday? And I'm an overachiever. So yeah, of course, we're going to do more and more. And then just today, handing her over and just walking back and just suddenly realizing the state of where I'm at, which is understandably low. I think in general, I'm okay, but for, let's say, justifiable reasons, I'm allowing myself to be low. But as I said before, I'm full of coffee. So you're going to get a low guy who's really hyper.
But I think as well that it's the experiences that you've been through allow you to bring that clarity to that moment, right? And again, it's the journey that you go on with your mental health is what you develop your sense of strength from. Because you know now how you feel, why you feel like that. You've got the kind of the self-awareness and the experience to understand all of that. But you also know that you won't feel like that forever.
That's it. I think that's the key thing. And also to recognize, there are sometimes some very subtle triggers or triggers that are just in your own head. I mean, genuinely, as in your own head, everything trying to kill you. And then there are external factors that are, of course, likely to upset you or to make you sad. And that is fine. It's okay for those to exist. You go through therapy, you can't remove all of these external factors. It's recognizing that they are factors and that you have the resilience to be able to take them into consideration and to say, well, I can get through this. I have the strength to do this. I've done it. Like the running, if you can run 10K, you can run 10K. If you've never done it before, that seems like an insurmountable journey. And that's definitely where I've come from. I would be a lot lower without a lot of the sort of tools and the experience that I've had over the last 5 to 10 years. But we'll get into that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's start to do that now. Let's kind of take some time to explore your mental health journey, and with this question, I always say to a guest, you can start this wherever you want to. If you want to go back to your childhood, if that was kind of the formative experience, great. If it was something that happened a few years ago, it's yours to answer as you see fit. But what I guess I'm asking you to do is talk us through a kind of an origin point and where that has kind of taken you and how those experiences have evolved over time.
Sure. I grew up in an environment with a very successful father and a really high expectation of what you were going to achieve, not in just as an adult, but really in life, what you were going to achieve at school. And the standard would get higher and higher and higher. And so to exist in our household was a very curious position of finding that the goals and the rules would change rapidly. So you worked hard in order to try to find this sense of like achievement, recognizing that it would almost burn you out trying to do it. And then the rules would change quite a lot. And if you stepped over the boundary, often without realizing it, then there was a lot of physicality or words. And so you grew up with this really tense environment. And, when you're a small child, you don't know what it's like outside that environment. So you internalize this. I am always wrong. I could be better. I will be driven. Yeah. So that there's like an engine that sits there like at the core of it. And even now, there's still a bit the idea of taking time off. I have to really regulate the idea that that's not weakness. It's not being pathetic. It's not being a sissy. All of these awful words that you just kind of build in. So I started in that kind of place, deeply respectful of what my parents had achieved from very, very little, but utterly terrified that, when your father gets home, that I got good at running as a kid because you had to run because you couldn't talk yourself out of what was coming. So there's at that sort of level and internalizing that and all that. And then the other side of it was growing up in an environment, despite them being medical professionals, where mental health, you were either in an asylum or you were just weak. There was no gap. There was no sort of, oh, well, you're having a bad day, let's look into this. My mum, a while back, said, oh, I want to show you your school reports. And I looked at them and looking at them through the lens of me as an adult, there's a kid who's really suffering, like something undiagnosed, or like there's lots of stuff that's not quite right. But she was just like, oh, look at what a bad child you were. And I thought it's so interesting to see it through these respective lenses. So like I say, this big drive and, you can never rest, you can never relax, you're never good enough, you don't deserve to be here, almost that feeling. And then as you move into being like, God, this is exhausting, I can't take this anymore. Well, there's no place to go. It's not like, oh, well, you're finding it hard at school because there might be something in you. You're finding it hard at school because you're not applying yourself hard enough. You're not working hard enough. You're not intelligent enough. You're almost an embarrassment because look what we've achieved ourselves. So a lot of these things would go on, of course, interspersed with lovely holidays and, money can buy lots of nice things. But that lived experience of never feeling enough, you carry it into adulthood, of course, as this ludicrous overachiever, trying to do so many things in the hope that at some point they or some external force will be like, oh, I love you. You're good enough and you're fine. And all of those things you've overcome. So my early 20s were high achievement, high stress, burning myself up, burning other people out, seeing anyone who was struggling as their own fault. I was awful. Like I wouldn't even. Every now and again, someone from that period will come back and be like, "My God, it's like you're a different person." And I got to know what they mean. I would be horrible to people because I was parroting the same thing that I'd raised. If you didn't commit everything, say to the business you were involved in or the sport or whatever, you were weak. What's the point?
Is it fair to say? And I know it's not quite headline grab here, but like, is it fair to say that you because you didn't feel empathy, you weren't the benefit of empathy when you were a kid, that you didn't develop that, or is that too harsh?
No, I think it's a fair point because I think when you grow up with what I now recognize to be fairly, well, let's say at least one parent quite narcissistic. And of course, every kid eventually wants to blame their parents for everything. My mother certainly feels that I'm definitely, it's all on me and there's nothing there. But with a parent who externalizes everything, if she's happy, then you must be happy. And if she's sad, you must be sad, even if you're happy. You start to follow that as a ritual.
Yeah.
Like, it's like dodging like a bullet. Oh, it's coming this way, it's coming that way. you know to anticipate other people's moods very quickly, and you also learn to strike first. This is the most important thing when you're in this kind of environment, because you know you can't be hurt if you're hurting somebody else. And so that lack of empathy, it doesn't empathy doesn't get you anywhere in that environment.
Yeah.
It doesn't help you achieve. It's a weakness, and it has to be kind of removed. So as a kid, you hear, oh, you should be nice to your neighbor and all the rest of this, but you feel like screw it. It makes you an amazing entrepreneur and capitalist early on. But what it doesn't do is build great partnerships, great companies, it makes you so lonely. And we'll get into that a little bit in some of the businesses I've been involved in. It makes you such an island. When you're succeeding, everyone wants to be around you. When you're failing, it is the most lonely place to be, because you've already made yourself out to be something that people are almost happy to see you fail, because you've kind of burnt them all the way down. And until you realize that everyone, this sort of journey, everyone's going through this battle that you can't see, you look at everyone and you think they operate the same way as you. So it's a really, right. Again, this is one of the great lessons of life. You're like, why is he not doing the thing? Just be better.
Yeah.
But that's not the way their brain works. Or they also didn't suffer the kind of weird childhood dynamic that I had. And actually, he just likes taking the weekend off. That's completely fine. All of these things I would have burnt people out for. I am now a big, open-hearted, empathetic hippie of a man now. Why we're happy to have this conversation. The me in my 20s would have thought this was the most pathetic waste of time ever. It really, really would. And so that guy, I don't want to have a beer with that guy. Or if I did, I want to go back to have a beer with that guy and just tell him just to calm down. It's fine.
Let's explore that a bit. I'm sorry, I don't want to kind of take you off on a tangent. Normally,
please do.
On the tangents here, but that's really interesting, because I think that. So there's an obvious question is, what would you say to yourself? But let's kind of put you in the position of somebody who's got a mate who's behaving like that now. You were that person by your own kind of definition. How would you approach that conversation with somebody who was behaving like that to try and actually cut through and have an impact on?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because I think about this where when I spot this behavior in other people, as you do once you've gone through this journey, and also like big reveal, guess what? Living life like this wasn't sustainable. So of course we'll get to that too. But I think, for me, people would point it out. They'd be like, you can't talk to people like that. Or, relationships would suffer with all sorts of people. And it would be their fault because I was always in the right. So I wouldn't have listened to any advice. I would have just found another friend. So I think if you see someone acting like that, if it's out of character, then there's a lot of, looking for external stresses or trying to understand them if there's someone you want in your life. But most people just moved on. So you then build this group of friends who are either very like you in that regard, or what I had is the opposite. Incredibly lovely, deep, empathetic, autistic nerds as friends who just didn't care. They liked the fact I could basically organize a party, and my empathy would be like, let's make this the best possible party. People will tell me it's good and I'm happy. But they were more intelligent than me, so they'd already won from their point of view. And we somehow managed to get on. So all my friends from that era, they didn't really need to tell me. They didn't think it was their business. So it is really difficult. I think if it's a change of behavior, of course, you can find an interjection point with people. But if that's your consistent behavior, people will just assume that's who you are as a person. And the thing is, I wasn't. It wasn't even a cry for help. I was just following the guidelines laid down by my parents, and to an extent, the wider sort of society of what you're meant to do in the environment I grew up in. Following the playbook, like a cargo cult. If I build this environment, I will get the riches and the reward, the house, the wife. Valhalla will open up to me. And you come to realize, of course, that, or when you hit a wall, you don't have the tools to be able to deal with it. You don't have the friends around you who are able to kind of help you through it. And you haven't built up any of the strengths that we speak about at the start that you kind of need. because you told yourself mental health, or let's say resilience, if you don't have it, by default, you're weak.
Mm.
And so when all of that falls apart, you have no structure left in order to be able to support you. So going back to your point, I think you've almost got to let people go through that experience themselves, which is the hardest possible thing. You know, what did they say? It's like a relationship. Let them go. If they come back, it's meant to be. And I feel it's a little bit like that with friends, people who knew me at the time, who've come back into my life, or stayed with me, but at a little bit of a distance. I'm so appreciative of them.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I guess it's like with kids, you've got to let them make their own mistakes and hope that they don't.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. I think exactly that. And I think especially as an adult, when you grow up in this particular environment that I grew up in, this sort of mix of weird like expectation and stresses and like clarity. Like my mum was very much like, people should do this. They should talk in this way and not in this way. They should open a door in this way. Everything was very, very precise. Definitely almost sort of spectrum-like behavior if there was a generation to observe it. You leave that environment and you think everybody else operates in exactly the same way. And when they don't, you're a bit lost. You've got to find your own way. So you're kind of like still a child. You think you're an adult. I started a company at 18, 19. I was employing, people who were twice my age, but I was still a child because I had the sort of edges taken off. And the resilience that comes from, of course, a fall, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Wow. I'm stopping myself from asking the next question, because the next question I was going to ask you is about like what the kind of the moments where the light bulbs come on and you start to realize that you need to do things differently. But I feel like I've interjected a bit early in your story so far. So we kind of you had got to the point where you were talking about being in your early 20s and sort of starting to leave home.
Yeah. So I've met the girl who would become my wife. I've started a company, a digital agency, a technical build agency in the late 90s. We're working with like Halifax and Samsung, major companies with this office from Aberdeen. We've got 20 or 30 employees. Externally, I own a Lotus Esprit, my dream car. I think I'm James Bond. Getting hand cut suits, all of this kind of like it's again cargo cult. It was like, this looks good, in the hope, I guess, if I'm really honest, that my dad would be like, "Well done, son. You're successful." But interestingly enough, because it was an entrepreneurial thing, I didn't just join a bank. He thought I was mad. It was almost the worst possible thing I could have done. At no point in my life, until I became a whiskey writer, because he could tell his golf friends, has he ever seen anything I've done as success, to the point where eventually you just give up trying, which is probably one of the key aspects. Don't try living your life impressing people, but my God, does that take a long time. We'll come a bit to that. So yeah, in my 20s, sports car, money, everything looks absolutely amazing. I believe I'm God's gift to the world. And, as many people I've hired have sort of just left out of sheer frustration. Then 2008 financial crisis comes. We were overextended. We had a lot of great opportunities, but we couldn't kind of bring them together. We were one of the first companies to go. I had to walk into a room and tell almost everybody that they were fired. Interestingly, side note to this, everyone has this sort of like awful nightmare that comes back to you. Most people didn't go through it. My nightmare is remembering walking in and telling everybody they've got 2 weeks to go. The financial crisis was coming, but hadn't really hit. So it wasn't like everybody knew. Everyone was getting fired all over the place. And of course, because I hadn't built up this partnership with them, they hated me. It was such palpable anger that I'd let them down, because of course I hadn't taken them on the journey as well. So the first cracks were starting to come in, that everything I did wasn't perfect. It wasn't great. It wasn't all right. And fast forward, I get an opportunity. I do some stuff in Scotland still. I get an opportunity in London to go and run at that point the largest by media spend, the largest social media account, which was for Sky Television in the UK. Being a man, I was like, yeah, I know some of that. Let's just go for it, and I'll dive myself in. If someone thinks I'm good enough and they want to pay me a lot of money to do it and fly me down, pay for me to come down to London, I'll go for it.
Yeah.
within the next 9 months, I had separated from my long-term partner. We'd been married a few years before this. I was effectively fired. I had driven myself into a position of such unacceptable lowness to me that I had to admit I had a problem. And I'll talk in a moment about like how I knew I'd had a problem, how bad it had to get.
Hmm.
There's burnout, and then hey, guess what? There's another door at the other side of that. That's like deeper burnout. So yeah, I mean, a period of years going from what was considered pretty successful and having all the trappings and all the rest of it to really questioning how I get through the day, how I survived the next day. It was as bad as that.
Hmm. And in terms of time frame, where are we now? It's sort of about 2010, 2011.
So I'm basically had my 30th birthday party, 31, 32 maybe. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, 2010 to 2012 is this like baptism of fire. We get separated. This amazing woman who's still a friend of mine looks at me and says, I know you will never leave me, but I know you want to, and I'm letting you go. And it was the most incredible moment because I had come to London, I'd become something else. It was like a sort of butterfly, Everything in Scotland was very closed off. You weren't allowed to be in any way sort of feminine, silly sort of word, but you know what I mean? Sort of flamboyant out there. Everything had to be one color. And I come to Glasgow and open up a bit more. In London, suddenly I'm this butterfly. I'm meeting new people. Oh, some of my friends are gay. Oh my God, wow. Like what a different experience it was. And it's so stupid to say it, but suddenly a whole world was open up to me. And I was a different person. And the woman I was married to, absolutely fabulous woman, she is as she was always been, exactly the same person. She's very comfortable with it. And I needed more. And she recognized that and she let me go. But the moment she moved out, in combination with this sort of downfall, the pressure of having taken on this job that I really couldn't do, living in this city that was so insanely expensive and so wonderful. I love London, but when it's at its worst, it is the most hateful place to exist. Tired of London, tired of life. God, how close that came. Tired of life feeling. Sitting alone in this large apartment and thinking, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am. I got to a point where I walked out of my house one day and I'd had pneumonia. And as a series of basically just being depressed, not looking after myself, uh, still coming into work because that's what you do, right? Especially pre-COVID, right? You remember this, you just get on the tube, it's sick as fuck, and you just carry on. And I had this weird turning point where I remember getting off the train at Charing Cross, living in Lewisham, getting off the train at Charing Cross, and I was walking to work and I couldn't. My legs just stopped. It was such a bizarre experience. And it was right next to St. Martin's in the Fields, where God bless them. They hand out meals every morning to some of the homeless. And I'm trying to walk to work, and I was laughing at the irony of you're going off to what is this golden job with all this money, and you're looking at people who've got next to nothing, and you can't walk to work, you weakling, you pathetic. And I found myself, if I just looked to my left a little bit, like I was turning, I could move, and turning, and I could move, and I found myself turning around, and I went home. And so, of course, if you don't come in enough, eventually they let you go. Nobody asked you, hey, by the way, are you all right? It was nothing like that. It was just, out the door and off we go. And I didn't have tons of money sitting around. So eventually, when you sit at home long enough and you can't get out of bed, you can't do anything, of course, bills start to mount up. Those were the only letters coming through the door. I hadn't left the house so long and I couldn't work out why or how. Time was really dissonant. It was separate. But I opened and I looked at my car and I was like, what is that stuck to the car? And there were 17 parking tickets. 17. So that's at least 17 days I hadn't left the house. I was peeling them like, what's going on with this? What has happened here?
Were you feeding How were you feeding yourself during that time?
Whatever food I had in the house, cereal mostly. I remember Frosties, ate a lot of Frosties.
Yeah.
And then you run out of milk, and then you were just eating them from the bowl. Like, it doesn't matter. Getting up, going to sleep, days in, days out. It really didn't matter. But I wasn't depressed, by the way, because I don't get depressed.
No.
Mental health is for other people. I'm fine. I'm just something's not. It's fine. Um, a friend phoned me, and people were in touch at this time. But a friend phoned me and said, put yourself on the camera." I put it on camera. She's like, "Jesus, mate, you look awful." And she said, "Is that a Christmas tree?" I said, "Yeah, it's a Christmas tree." She's like, "Mark, it's March. What the hell have you got a Christmas tree?" And she was obsessed with this Christmas tree. She's like, I don't care what you do. And I've got a letter I'll read to you later, just a few words from it. "I don't care what you do, Mark. You get that Christmas tree out of the house now, and then you phone me back." And you know what? Christmas trees are a nightmare if you leave them, right? There are needles everywhere. It's a total hassle, right? So I'm picking this thing, I've spiked, trying to wrap it up, throw it out the fucking door. And they come out, and the needles are everywhere. Oh, needles are everywhere. It's like, well, you got to hoover. Okay, hoovered. Okay, now do something else. And it was little bit by little bit by little bit, just a little thing here and there. I made the place presentable. It wasn't just covered in any old takeaway and whatever, all the rest of it. And I felt a little bit better. And she knew exactly what she was doing. She was incredible. And it was the start of a very slow realization that I was depressed and that depression was real, and all of these things, the guilt of realizing how many times I put people down, or even just thought this was weakness, the annoyance of realizing you've been raised in an environment that gave no quarter to being able to be low or unhappy even for a second. And then the very real realization that I had thousands of pounds of unpaid bills and parking tickets and all the rest of it. And then you question, well, what's the easiest way to handle this? And your mind goes to some difficult places. So within a period of 2 years, I would say 2008 to, let's say, 2010, I came to a point of two main things. One, not knowing who I was, because I'd been so confident in exactly what I stood for. Very, very right wing, let's say centre right, politically. Remember the Conservative Party, which is so laughable now. When you, if you hear me, you know what I write on Instagram. All of the views you would expect from a sort of Thatcherite kind of Tory of immigration and all the rest of this. Very traditional in the way that I thought about life, the way I dressed. Myself as a married man, I've let this woman disappear from me because I'm sort of flouncing around London. I just realized I didn't know. I didn't know who I was. And the journey from my friend getting rid of the Christmas tree led me randomly to a record shop. Record shop in Lewisham is amazing because they're all full of like these old Jamaican pressing records that some OG has passed away and the son's just bucked them off to the shop. And there was this old Irish dude who just ran this shop with records all over, absolute chaos. And I'd seen this YouTube video about, if you're depressed, just get out of the house. It's someone with a little ukulele. It was such a stupid song. Depressed, just get out of the house, go to a record store. And I was like, okay, I went to this record store and he's like, have a look around, put some records on. Would you like a whiskey? I was like, yeah, all right. Yeah, have a whiskey, buy some records. And that became my everyday. It gave me something to do. And it's why I've got a humongous collection of really, really high quality Jamaican pressing records now. So I've invested very successfully in life. But I tell you what, those from a point of real depression, that was a good thing. But also practically recognizing or listening to people who said, Mark, you're depressed, you've got to go and get some help. And I really didn't feel comfortable about doing that until it was nearly too late.
So important. What I can fully relate to the little by little journey that you kind of started on with this, because there are parallels with sort of my experience. I found out through burnout, anxiety, depression that led me to therapy that I'm essentially a clinical perfectionist, and I think you'll relate to this pretty hard. But for me, the way that manifests itself is I don't start something because I'm not going to be brilliant at it straight away. You can imagine how self-defeating that is. So the combination of clinical perfectionism and low self-esteem just got me to the point where I was signed off work for months. And I remember when I first got signed off, I spent the first 2 weeks. I had 2 small children, my wife, and I spent the first 2 weeks of that asleep. I didn't think that there was anything that I could do. And it started, the progress for me was, have I actually managed to go downstairs today?
Right. Such a big achievement.
Huge. Compared to not having done anything apart from lie around in bed for 3 days before that, or however long. You go downstairs. Then you go downstairs the next time you feel like you need to go downstairs. And then before you know it, getting up and going downstairs is just a thing you do. Take that off the list, but you've seen it as progress. And that, in recognizing that something as tiny as that is progress, is the key to being able to do the next thing, right?
Then my God, it exactly as you say. And I think within that as well is either having no one around you, as I had in my case, and I had it easy in a way, because you're always like, oh, well, I didn't have kids around. I didn't have, it was just me on my own. In a way, I could just lie and be depressed for as long as, time required in that kind of sense. Having people around you where you're able to find these small gains and they also recognize them, I think is so important. And I think, we'll talk a little bit about it, but those who go through this experience that you and I have gone through, who don't have support around, or worse, have people who are like, well, so what? Oh, he's got up today, like that kind of thing, or make a sort of mockery of it. That's, I think, the hardest place to be. When your own experience, your own journey is muted, by others around you. So that support structure, I think, it's such a privilege in a way to have. Right?
No, it is. It absolutely is. And I was also incredibly fortunate that I was in a job where I could get the benefit of healthcare. So I could get the fast track into psychotherapy sessions. Because I did, irony upon irony, the journey to that point, I had already been to the GP. I'd already been referred to talking therapies on a couple of occasions, done the assessment, and they determined that my need wasn't urgent enough. So you're trying to do something preemptive because you recognize that something's not right, and you end up being rejected. So again, low self-esteem, you get rejected when you've done that. It's not going to make anything better for you, is it?
Oh my God, I think about this a lot around, we'll speak about it a little bit as well, like around, there's a lot of thing now around, if you're a man, if you're low, just tell a mate. I love that idea. And I think that's so powerful. But also you might tell a mate who's just like, oh my God, I don't know how to handle this. Or if you've had it in your head for so long, like turning around and saying, all right, John, I actually think I'm not really worth living anymore and I might kill myself. What is he supposed to do with that? It's so difficult. So that rejection the first time round is often what I think leads people to great. They thought, okay, I'm told I can speak to someone. I've tried. Yeah. And it was as awful as I thought it was going to be. I can't go and see John anymore. It was the only person who I could go for a pipe with. And I messed that up like I mess up every bloody thing I've ever done. And I'll just sit on my own. And you see that those lifelines disappear for people.
100%. And actually, I think one of the things that I've come to realize through doing this show is that I kind of initially, my starting point for this was showing people who need it that talking about this stuff is good, and that they're not the only people that have felt like that, and that there is a route through it. But what I've come to realize, particularly over the last sort of 10 or so episodes, is actually I want guys to be able to hear this, because when their mate opens up to them,
Right.
they don't need to have all the answers. Then they need to know that they don't need to have all the answers, right? But there's a kind of a big job to be done to kind of educate men in how to deal with it when someone does open up.
100%. Sometimes just saying nothing. It's hard for us as men because we're problem solvers, right? Or at least we're educated to be problem solvers. So someone opens up, well, a good way of getting through the day is just not topping yourself, Mark. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for that. That's it solved now. I'll just go back to the job I hate, and the lifeless, pointless existence I had before. But no, you're exactly right. Like, most people have never been near therapy. I would never have gone had I not got to the point where people were almost dragging me to it, and have this. We can talk a bit about it, but have this revelatory experience, and find how easy it was to go from just literally thinking there's no point in me existing on this earth to getting something. And that jump, in hindsight, was super, 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 super easy. But for me, it was the hardest possible thing. I only happened to mention where my brain was at because people could see it. I'd gone from being very social to suddenly not being anywhere. And I guess also it was the start of what's become quite a useful place for me of just telling the world how I'm feeling, and not feeling like, oh, he's feeling sorry for himself, just being like, I don't care if you think I'm feeling sorry for myself. If you cannot see that I'm going through this crisis, that's on anybody. Like if someone's going to see where I'm at and reach through the darkness to help, I would sooner have that one person in my life than the 50 I had before.
Yeah. And I would pick up on something that you did say, like sometimes saying nothing. I actually think the showing that you're listening does not involve you saying anything. And I think the more men that understand that, the better. Just giving that person the chance to articulate something that they've never articulated before, in most likelihood, so that they can frame the words themselves, and being comfortable with the silence is huge. Absolutely huge. And if more men could learn those skills, just imagine how powerful that could be for society as a whole.
How many lives would be saved? I had a friend where he said, oh, how are you? I'm fine. He said, no, how are you? I haven't got cancer. This would be my stock line, worst things happen at sea kind of thing. And he's like, no, you don't, Mark. But it might be just as bad for you. And I was like, oh God, I should think I'm going to be sick. I don't know how to do in this conversation now, because I'm used to just everyone else would be like, oh, he's fine. It's all right. Just leave it. And he was giving me space to talk about it. And, going back to this sort of step by step by step, first of all, people had to see, and we're not very good at letting people into that world, again, because we don't know it ourselves, and we don't have the cues. And again, we feel pathetic, and, we're not achieving, and all of those kind of things wrapped in together. But I think if you put a small smoke signal up, the person who responds to you might not necessarily, this guy who I had a conversation with, we're not even friends. We fell out over something ridiculous years later. But he is such a pivotal stepping stone, because he was one of the few that bothered to turn up and sort of had to force his way into the house and just sat with me and asked me genuinely how I was and got me to talk about it. So yeah, that just ability to listen, or even invoking that listening, just giving someone space, it saved that life for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So I think we've naturally got ourselves to question 4 here, Mark, which is, along this journey, there have been a series of kind of pivotal moments, and you've already identified some of those. But this question is what are the light bulb moments? And for me, the light bulb moments can be either a realization that there are things that you need to start doing, or a realization there are things that you really need to stop doing that are going to help you progress. Do you
Yeah,
have
that's a great way of putting
one
it.
of those?
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain. For absolutely certain. I think what are they? Again, it's that Kierkegaard line: "Life is lived forward and understood backwards." But there is a certain sense of sometimes, and for me, it was getting sick because I was basically the way. Again, also the way I was raised is like thinness is better. So I had this weirdly weird combination of overachieving. I had to look a certain way, and so I just wasn't eating, but I was drinking. And the classic London way, you can hide, I wouldn't want to say alcoholism, but let's say alcoholism adjacent very easily in London because everyone's always up for a pint, not non-stop. In fact, if you weren't drinking in that era, then it was an odd thing to do, especially in advertising. So not eating and drinking. And then you reach an age where like the hangovers are just insane, but I wasn't quite at that stage yet. So what I was doing is basically eating myself away from the inside. It was affecting my quality of sleep. It was affecting how I operated on a day-to-day basis. It affected what I was doing with others. And a few people were calling me to account. So I was able to sort of look externally and think, it doesn't feel good.
Mm.
And then it was getting this double pneumonia, which again, I was just like, it's a cold, it's a cold, it's a cold. And I found I couldn't walk up the hill to my house. I thought, oh, maybe I'll just keep walking and then just go down to the doctors and see. And then they put me in an ambulance, took me to hospital. That's how bad it had to get before I could say I needed a change. So that was one of the first when people externally could see that I was going through this horrible experience, basically sort of drinking myself through a problem. But I couldn't see it, and going to hospital and having that experience was definitely one of the sort of pivotal moments. And you think, well, that seems kind of obvious, but if you haven't gone through it before,
No.
especially growing up in an environment like Scotland where everyone drinks all the time and you just drink through your problems and shut the fuck up,
Yeah.
you kind of need, again, like we said, what would I say to myself going through that? I wouldn't have listened. I would have just found the next guy who wanted to drink. It was kind of like that. So I think that's the first thing. The second is, as I said, this sort of moment of like not being able to get to work. I mean, clearly it was something wrong, but I still couldn't put it like down as this idea that it was a mental health problem. It was something else. And then this friend who I told you phoned and saw the Christmas tree was there, wrote me this letter. It's a short one. I'm just going to read it to you. It's on this beautiful paper. Her name is Carly Woodall, and she's very dear to me. She wrote, "Life is about being happy, not about exhausting yourself to the point of serious illness in search for feeling alive. Real living is peace, contentment, and joy. You are alive. You don't need to incessantly prove it to yourself. You just don't. You are beautiful, kind, and remarkable. Stop trying to live up to the expectations of others and live."
Wow.
Right? That's been on my wall in every place I've ever moved to. And at times it was sort of almost biblical verse to me, because when she wrote that to me, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it at all. It was the opposite of what I thought. Life was exactly about exhausting myself in this idea of feeling alive. The people around me needed to be the most interesting people. That drink needed to be the best possible drink. It had to be a Michelin star restaurant. All of these things had to be immediate. And it was kind of like I was living every day like it was literally my last. Some of the days I would have in London were like, if it was dream day, I could tell at the Ritz. And then it was insane. I was operating at this pace that could not be sustained, both mentally, and financially, and of course, physically. So that letter is such an interesting reflection on where I was. And I don't remember that guy. And then I had a friend who was a policeman, and he told me this story. He worked for the BTP, the British Transport Police, and he told me this story about a guy he'd seen. He said this happens relatively often. And it was a guy getting off a train into London from, let's say, Kent somewhere, big house in the countryside, well-dressed, briefcase. And he found him because he was standing on the platform when the train had gone. And obviously everyone's a bit worried when there's someone waiting on the platform, when there's nobody about in case it's a jumper. And he went up to this guy and he said, "Oh, can I help you?" And he said, "Sorry, I can't see. I've gone blind." He said, "Okay." okay, what's happened? And he would, come have a tea, sir. Very kind guy anyway. So he took him in, gave him a tea, gave him a biscuit, and he's like, "Oh, so sorry, I'm embarrassed myself. Oh, I don't know, what, you're very posh." And he started to tell this story that the reason that he thought he'd got himself into this position is that he'd lost his job 2 months ago. He'd lost his job 2 months ago, but he couldn't tell anybody. He couldn't tell his wife back at home in the manor. He couldn't tell his 3 children who were at a very expensive school. He couldn't tell his brother, anyone of his family. So he put on his suit every day and he came to work. And he would just walk around London aimlessly in the hope that something would come from it. He would just find his way through. And this day he'd woken up and found the first bill he couldn't pay for, and he couldn't hide it anymore. And he knew when he got home in the evening, his wife was going to find all about everything he'd lied about. And so when he got off that train, he just collapsed. And I thought, I feel every element of that story. I understand that entirely. That feeling of you just keep going and it'll be fine. It'll be absolutely fine. That's what they did in the past. That's what they did in the war. That's what's expected of me as a man. And somehow hearing that story, I thought, I'm so close to that. So this sort of reference point of seeing, it's not like I was looking, oh, that's my hero. He's off doing something amazing. I was like, no, that guy's my hero. He's he's like my roommate. It's like the guy at the end of the bar who's had more beers than you. I could see how I could get there.
Mm.
And all of these things coming together, especially with a good friend of mine who said, look, I'm sitting with you as we look through a website, all therapists in your area, and I'm booking a therapist with you. I can't go. You have to pay. Will you do it? And I refused it so many times. Eventually turned up, like, booked. And she said, I'm going to give you one piece of advice. You go into that room and you are more honest with that person than you are with yourself. I said, well, whatever. And she said, well, I'll give you another pitch because, you're Scottish. If you do that, it's much cheaper because you get through the sessions faster. And my God, they were right. They were right. I walked into that room and we'd barely even said hello. And I was like, my father used to beat me a lot, and I don't think that's very good. And he's never apologized. So, okay. So normally we talk about how the payment works, and I was like, no, forget that. Let's just get into it, right? Get into it. So yeah, it was best advice. And obviously, if I hadn't been ready for it, it wouldn't have been right. But it was very effective at saving money for therapy. I'll be honest with you.
Wow. I mean, there is to a lesser extent, when I went into therapy, I was absolutely willing. I was willing to go on medication. I was willing to go into therapy because I knew that I just needed to do whatever it took to not feel like I was feeling. But it sounds like you went in different route to get there, but it sounds like you went into that same session with the similar kind of mindset. There's a couple of questions that I've sort of scribbled down that I hope are okay to ask. If they're not okay to ask, then I want you to tell me. Don't hold back, okay? So the first is about whiskey, and the second is about parents. So I'll do the second one first, actually.
Sure.
How is your relationship with your parents since? Actually, I'm asking a question. I don't know if your parents are both around, but how did your relationship with your parents change once you went through this experience?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my relationship with my parents is fantastic. I just don't talk to them. And they don't talk to me, and it's worked out brilliantly. No, what it did was it gave me. I walked in and I literally said those words. I wasn't even joking, and I realized I'd been saying this. What had I done wrong? What had I done wrong? What had I done wrong my whole time? To say it out loud, it let it go. I'd done nothing wrong. I wasn't a bad boy, a bad child. I didn't deserve any of those to feel so bad. But then, of course, you come out and you think, well, I want justice for this. I want to understand, like, why did you think that was okay? And of course, it takes a lot to go to a parent and say, look, these are my memories with you. Yeah, I mean, we went to Disneyland, but at the same time, I also got, beaten because I didn't finish a food. Like what? Like I would sooner not have Disneyland if I had the choice, And trying to find a way of putting elderly people on the spot is not fun. But I felt I needed to. But it was so quickly washed away. I don't remember that. Well, you weren't complaining about it when you were at private school. Oh, lots of this, and I understand it. Nobody wants to be reminded of the things that they've done in the past, whether they agree to them or not. But at no point was there an apology. And I think what it allowed me to do was realize two things, I guess. One is that the standards they set for me, you must apologize, you must do this, you must do the rest of it, they were never going to live up to themselves. And I think it was the fight. When you're a kid and you're running and you beat your dad, you're like, "Fuck you, dad, I'm the best ever." That starts an amazing trajectory of realizing that you're not your father. You might be better, it might be worse, might be different, might whatever, but there's something else, and you see your father as in this different light, not a protector, not a this, not a that. He's something else, and this was almost the final bracket, the other side round of going, I will never be good enough for them, and that's their fault. They will never apologize. I have to accept that, however difficult that is. All I can do is live my life forwards and hope when I have children, because this was before my beautiful daughter was born, that I can be a better man, that without knowing how to be a parent, because I can't follow my own parents' example, I can to try to be better. And we can speak a bit about that later. So I was able to kind of compartmentalize them and put them in a box and not be a people pleaser with them, realizing I didn't have to dance. But if you live with a narcissist and you don't dance to their tune, then you're a black sheep.
Yeah.
Then you're a weirdo. Then you're well, he was always a wrong and kind of sort of thing. So that's where the dynamic started to kind of come from there. So it would always come a little bit back to, as I said, the school reports at the start. Well, you were a bad child, weren't you, Mark? These kind of things, And the more you can pull away from it, the more that continues. And I got to the point where I thought, I don't need to feel sad. Because as you know yourself, you can go through therapy, you don't get fixed. No. You just get better tools, right? And I would almost say the sort of the bump in the road I had 3 years ago when I finally tried to confront them and try to fix it all was almost worse than the first time round. It got me so low that I think it was just having my daughter and conjuring her name up every night that kept me alive. If I'm honest with you, that's how low it was. Even though I had some of the tools from before, it was sort of blown out the water. So it was horrible. But there's to sum it up, you tell your people, tell friends, I don't speak to my parents. A whole bunch of people will be like, oh my God, what a shame. Or they'll try and fix it. And I want to say, can you imagine how awful a relationship would have to be with somebody who raised you, that you actually, it's better to imagine they've already died, because that's less painful than having them in your life. No, it's not a fucking shame. It's great. It's great for everybody involved. And I think that, these are the sort of things about, maturing, where nothing's going to be perfect. It's not all just sail off into the sun and everyone fixes it and all the rest of it. It's not that. It's gritty and it's horrible. And you have to confront both who they are and who you are. Your faults, your mistakes, all the rest of it, and decide, on balance, what is better for the family structure you've set up just now. And as I say, I look at my daughter and I think, I don't want her to see the results of this anxiety, this stress, this loneliness that I get anytime I would spend time with my own parents. I want to try to live better. She'll moan at me, oh, Daddy, you're so strict with me, or anything. I want to be like, oh my God, kiddo, let me just tell you how it was, okay? Because you think I'm strict because I haven't let you have the second Coke of the day,
Do you think you'll ever have that conversation with her when she's older? Or do you think it's better left unsaid.
Well, it's funny because joking aside, I mean, I really do have the conversation because it's an interesting one because this one of these sort of the tools, we'll come on to the tools, is this sort of radical honesty. I still want her to be a kid. Don't want her to feel like the adult life is terrifying. But she watched the Never-Ending Story with me recently, and she was able to watch Artak sinking without even emoting for a second. Okay, if you can watch a horse sink in the mud because it's too sad and just not even cry, I think she's ready to hear about some of the realities of life. That was my test. So, but it's a funny one because my second marriage, also, failure. Who knows? Successful, but we're not together. We got a great kid from it. She likes my parents, and so my daughter is going to see them, and they'll stay in the house next week. So it's a really bizarre dynamic, because again, they're still my daughter's grandparents, and all my family are back in Scotland. So if my ex thinks that's a nice, safe environment for my kid to go to, well, that's a battle I'm not prepared to have. But I did say to my daughter, when I was a kid, I would be hit. Like, oh, okay. I'd be shouted at a lot and things like this. And she thinks about it and she's like, oh, when you were young, it was a different time, and your parents would hit you. I was like, yeah, they would. And she talks about it. But, I'm sure in time, I'll get the therapy bill from her. Like, Dad, did you have to tell me about the beating?
But I guess there's got to be, especially if she's seeing them with her mum, there's got to be some sort of setting of context as to why you're not taking her as well, and that honesty is probably
This is it.
Medicine, isn't it?
This is it. And I think, I trust her. She's only 7, but she's a mature kid. I trust her that she'll either not say, hey, why did you beat my dad? Or if she says it, they've got to respond to it because it's true. They did. They did. And if they want to laugh it off or say, oh, your dad's misremembering it, all the rest of it, then that's fine. That's their choice to do it. But you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to be a traditional parent, as it were, and then not account for it in the future. Especially when I feel as a father who, don't get me wrong, my kid can piss me right off, but I have never even for a second thought of raising a hand to her. Not even for a second, not even a millisecond. And that break, that snap of, the way I was raised to the way I look after my kid is honestly one of the very few things I'm proud about in my own life. I've achieved so much externally. You might look in and, oh, Linton, he's done all this and this. That is by the by. Being able to look at my kid and not feel the need to rear her the way I was reared, that's pretty much my main accomplishment.
Wow. Okay. That was a very generous answer. Thank you, Mark, for being so honest. So the other question I had was about whiskey. So you mentioned earlier on that when you were at that low point, you were drinking, not eating, alcoholic adjacent.
Yeah.
But you've also gone on to start businesses in that field. You've been a whiskey writer for some time now. How has that experience of going from one position to the other, how has that been? I don't know if I can ask a more specific question because I don't.
No. I think I get the idea of it. It's a really interesting one because I think to me, it's a test of, and maybe this is what an alcoholic says, but it's the test of that you're not alcoholic if you how you use alcohol, I guess, to put it like that. When I was at my absolute lowest and it felt like I just didn't want to live anymore, yeah, like going out and drinking and trying to like find enjoyment at the end of a bottle or with the people who were still drinking like that was a lot of fun. But it could also stop. Something else would take over. And, you're a big runner. I'm a big runner now in my later life. The other addictions kicked in and they ticked those kind of boxes. So I was able to sit next to a bottle of whiskey and not drink it. I have this great collection of whiskey that I go through bit by bit as a connoisseur. but I'm not using it as a crutch. And I think that's what's allowed me to say, okay, I don't feel, as I say, that alcoholic adjacent. I think if you use alcohol like an alcoholic does, you're kind of the same thing, but you shouldn't conflate it. I think that's my feeling. Also, writing about it and allowed me to connect, because I hated whiskey when I grew up in Scotland. It's just old and fuddy and all the rest of it. You know, you have to leave, right? Exactly. You know, something my grandfather would have drank. You know, that's it. But it connected me to a bit of Scotland that I actually really appreciated. I couldn't wait to leave Scotland because I was too English sounding to be Scottish, and you know, I wasn't English enough in England. But whiskey gave me this sort of root and this tapestry and this kind of way through. Not just the taste of it, that's part of it, but the mechanics of it, the production, the history, the tales, all of the rest of this. Yeah. And it's what allowed me to come in from the writing side. So the drinking it at the end is just a nice sort of summary aspect to it. Of course, don't get me wrong, of course, I have friends around, a bottle of whiskey comes out, we're going to drink a little too much, but I don't reach for it. What I reach for nowadays, like I said before, you know, upset at dropping my daughter off and not seeing her for 2 weeks. I went and ran a bloody half marathon in the heat that we've got here. That's another addiction. You know, it's a different type of way, but I think it's a healthier one.
Yeah, yeah. Apropos of nothing, you and I meet in a bar in Malmo, and they've got some decent whiskies on the rack. What are you going to buy me? What's my first whiskey that you're going to buy?
This is a great question. So I think I'm going to go in with something which is really, really well made, reasonably priced. It's a Teeling small batch whiskey. It is pound for pound one of the best whiskies. Big Scotch fans love it, even though it's Irish. What I mean by that is always thought of a little derivative, sometimes Irish whiskey. There's a great family name behind it. They've only been around 10, 15 years. You can visit the distillery. It's just wonderful. It's a real modern presentation of great whiskey, and it's affordable. Of course, I could take you to the high shelf, the weird, unusual Japanese, or try and wreck you with this high proof stuff. Forget it. We could open that bottle, deck of cards. We'd finish a good few of those drams. Be a little merry when we left, but we'd put the world to rights.
Excellent. Right. So now I've got someone I can approach for sponsorship as well now with a unprompted name drop in there. Okay, no, I'm going to do it. But I am also going to look up for that whiskey and
stuff.
Thank you, Mark. This has been an incredible conversation. So we are now at question 5. And question 5, as always, in this conversation is somebody comes to you and they have been through a similar experience. Based on purely on your lived experiences, what is the most important thing, or what are the most important things that person can do?
I think there's a few different things, and I've got this chip here. I don't know if you can see it. 0 fucks given. Right, there we go. I was given this at a conference. Just randomly. Oh, you'll have one of these. It came with a sticker and it came with this chip. And what's great about a poker chip, because you can swing it in your hands. I realized last year that I had this insane level of anxiety, and I didn't know it. I just thought it was me. And I didn't want it to go away, actually, because it allowed me to achieve lots of different things. I was kind of nervous about everything. So I always overthought things. And this chip reminds me, chill the fuck out. Like, chill out. Not just do it, but take the process. Find a way. You don't need to be this anxious all the time. There were tools. There was mindfulness. There's all sorts of things that you can do. Most of the things you care about and you're prepared to worry about to the point of near death actually aren't really that important. They just feel important, and you don't have the tools to fix it. So when I'm stressing about something, this thing's been turned over in my hands, and it's like, yeah. And I can kind of let it go a little bit, not the whole time, but I can remind myself of some of the tools that I've got. So I think having your own, mantra, motto, physical thing, elastic band, whatever it is, it doesn't fix it in itself, but it can play back to a great conversation you had maybe, or a positive moment, or ideally some therapy, some anxiety reducing techniques. The other is total honesty. And total honesty is coupled also with this sort of radical life change approach that I've got. So total honesty is just, if someone asks you how you are, just tell them, I'm not having a great day. At the last startup I was in, we implemented this thing where you'd say literally how your mental health was. You weren't forced to, but if you wanted to. And it was the most wonderful feeling to be able to walk in as the CEO of this company and say, no, actually really, really awful. Like I almost didn't come in today, everybody. And people going, understood. They're not fix it. They just knew. And someone else be like, oh, I'm pretty manic. I'm all over the place. I'm put my headphones on. Like, it'll look like I've had 15 coffees. But I'm okay. Like, oh, okay. So being honest with people, and if it scares them, fuck them. I'm sorry. Like, that's just the way it is. You need, or I find, support in being able to be really, really transparent with where you are. And I think that comes from, not being understood, being very different to my own family, over explaining things a lot, just being straightforward. This is how it is. You'll tend to find that the good people come in closer to you, and the people that are kind of just sort of fair weather friends, they get a bit scared by it and they disappear. And that also goes for me, as you've seen. I don't advocate everybody does this, but I'm radically or totally honest in every platform, way too much, probably. But it has won me some wonderful contacts and friends and networks, because they've been able to say, hey, I really like what you're speaking about there, or I see that you're suffering on this. Have you, do you know this person? Or like, little connections like that have been really, really interesting. And so, you give out to the wider world, it might just come back in a good way. And those that don't, fuck them. Radical life change. I've been divorced twice, not because I enjoy divorce. It's massive ball ache, if I'm honest with you. And I've, my bank manager would say this was a very unwise thing to do, but I needed to for my own sake. I tried my best to fix the last relationship, and I just couldn't fix it. Okay, walk on. Like, it's okay. Like, it's better that than being dead. That's so. Making these changes, like removing my parents from my life, all the rest of this. Society says, be a good boy. Do what's expected of you. You just suffer in silence. I think, fuck that. I really do. It's not arrogant to protect yourself, especially if you've got kids in the mix as well. If you become a better person because your anxiety drops, your stress drops, your, whatever, and you can still go to work and, all the rest of it, then I think it's great. And the last thing I think is finding an addiction that makes you deeply boring and fitter. And running is definitely it. It's so funny. 5 years ago, I was such a, I'm a big guy naturally. My body type is like Irish labourer, right? Nobody, my last partner used to call me Two-Burger Jennings because one burger was never enough, right? And it's true. I would absolutely smash 2 burgers, but I didn't have any exercise on the other side. So, you come to dinner with me, you don't have to ask if we're getting dessert. We're all getting dessert, okay? So, when the running kicked in, completely against, I couldn't run I literally couldn't run 2 kilometers. And at the end of that year, 5 years ago, I ran 60 kilometers in a race. I just replaced one addiction with another. So no one has to run. But I tell you what, as soon as someone mentioned running before I started running, I was like, oh, shoot me now. Honestly, he's going to talk about running. He's going to talk about races. So going back to disliking the person I was when I'm 20 and couldn't be having a drink with them. The runner that I am now, as you know, and the races I'm doing and all the enthusiasm I get from it. 5 years ago, Mark couldn't have sat in the same room. So, I think radically reinvent yourself. As long as you're having fun and you're not hurting other people, you're going to be okay. And I think just to sort of, in summary of it, I'm laughing. We're having a bit of a joke. I'm sitting here in front of you, and I'm really glad we've been able to get into lots of these subjects. But there were many moments I honestly couldn't see the point in getting through to the next hour, let alone the next day. And if there's anything to take from it, yeah, I've got a process that I can talk about now in hindsight. That's kind of hard fought, a hard one. But exactly as you said, a lot of people, especially if someone's listening just now and they can't get out of bed, you will get there. You will be able to get there. Just hold on. Hold on. Don't do anything stupid. Don't do anything that you're going to, stupid is the wrong word, but anything, it's the worst possible outcome of the whole thing. Get up and make yourself some breakfast. Phone someone, write down a note, roll over to the other side of the bed, whatever it takes to get yourself a little bit further along and do it, because you'll find so many riches on the other side. And that's, I guess, the sort of summary from all the process, all the rest of it. I am such an advocate now for just getting through to the next day in a way that there've been times when that didn't feel like it was really a point for anyone.
That is the perfect way to round this conversation off, Mark. I'm so grateful for your willingness to come forward and share this story. I appreciate. Now I understand is I could have asked you this in passing, and I would have got a radical answer, honest answer. But it's so important that other guys hear this stuff. They know that I want people that can relate to the guy that you used to be to hear this.
Nice. Totally. Yeah, me too.
I also
me
want
too.
people. I want people to know the guy you are now, and I think you've done such an amazing job of articulating that and making that accessible to other people in this conversation, that I have absolute confidence that this is going to help somebody else who needs to hear it. If somebody hears this and they'd like to get in contact with you, is that okay for them to do that?
I love it. I've got no problem with that at all. Absolutely no problem at all. Even if it feels, oh, should I do it? Do it. Just do it. Get in touch.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll make sure that you're tagged on the social posts when they go out with the episode so that people can find you really easily there. And I'll drop a links to your socials in the descriptions as well for that. But yeah, this has been an awesome conversation, and I very much appreciate it, Mark. To our listeners, viewers, however you're consuming this, thank you for joining us for this conversation. I hope that you found this as interesting and as helpful as I have. If you have found it helpful and you know specific people that would benefit from hearing or watching this, please send it to them. We're doing this so that we can build out this bank of conversations over time, so they are there for when people need to see or hear them. So if there's somebody you know that's going on this path, has been on a similar journey to where Mark is, please send this with them directly. Please amplify this, share it on your social channels, subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you consume it, because there will be more of these conversations coming, and each one of these has the power to make a positive difference to somebody. We'll be back again very soon with another episode of Good Enough Chats, and in the meantime, take care, look after yourselves.